Kick things off, I'll hand over to Amy and Felix to run through tax year end. Over to you guys.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Camilla. Felix, thank you for taking the time to talk to us today. We're really excited to hear everything you've got to tell us about tax year end and what that's like at SINE Digital. So it would be really great if you could start by giving us and our lovely audience an overview of SINE Digital, size, industry, how many years you've been in operation and how long you've been with them.
Yeah, of course. Thanks, Amy. So I'm the CFO at SINE. We're a digital marketing agency specialising in live events. We're headquartered in London, where the majority of our team are based, but we have a small office in New York. We launched in 2017, and I was one of the co-founders, so I've actually been here since day one. I think I may have even been in employee number sort of 2 or 3. And now we're up to 85 across the group. And I think that's 5 in New York and the rest in the UK.
You didn't get to be employee number 1 then? Somebody else to work for you.
Someone else had that honour. I think we were too busy to pay ourselves in the early days.
That's about right. Amazing. So how did you first hear about Bob and what led you to choose UK Payroll to be your sort of go-to payroll provider?
Yeah, sure. So to begin with, we were using Xero as our accounting software. So we used the Xero payroll module. And then I can't even remember the name, but we had a very basic piece of HR software as well to manage holiday, things like that. Those two systems didn't speak to each other. So there was a lot of duplication of data entry and pretty much nothing entered by employees, all managed by myself. And look, that's fine when you're a small team, but as soon as you get to double figures and above, you've got to start thinking about efficiency there and also minimizing potential issues. Employee data, that quality of that data is so important, particularly for year-end filings. So we were looking at a standalone function or piece of software for payroll, but at the same time wanting to essentially choose a piece of HR software that we knew we could scale with. So I think we finally found and onboarded Bob when we were just over 25 employees. And I knew at that point that it would be a scalable solution where we could still be using that and UK Payroll when we were sort of 3, 4, 5 times the size. And that's what's happened. Thankfully, it was back at the beginning of 2022 where we made the jump and onboarded HiBob and UK Payroll.
Amazing. Great. So what does tax year end look like for you guys at SINE and how does UK Payroll play into that?
Yeah, so I've been thinking about this in advance, and ultimately tax year end can be a fairly simple process if you're on top of things at each month end. And the way I feel comfortable that we do keep on top of things is by having a payroll solution that integrates with HMRC, integrates with our pension provider, deeply integrates with what is the source of truth for employee data, which should always sit within the HR software. As long as that's set up and those integrations are working, then I know that as part of each month end and each monthly payroll, doing checks there, essentially that's paying it forward, knowing that really it's dotting the I's and crossing the T's at year end. For instance, if your leavers are marked correctly as leavers within the correct month, then you don't really need to worry about that at year end. Really, it's just about making sure that your HMRC account matches with what you've been filing through UK Payroll. Thankfully, again, if you're on top of that at each month end, the last few years, we've had no issues with that. An example of where sometimes you can get discrepancies, or if you, even a few days late, HMRC are pretty hot on charging interest on late PAYE payments. Now that's not pushed back to any sort of payroll software. So sometimes you'll get discrepancies in sort of total annual liabilities because of interest that's accrued. And again, it just shows the importance of keeping on top of things at each month end. UK Payroll also makes payments as well, and it can ultimately just gives us one total value to transfer at each month end, which covers wages and the next HMRC bill. So yeah, a key point from me really is do the work within the year, and you can really minimise the burden that tax year end can be. I know the poll is about benefits, and that's a really good example actually of how you can reduce some of the paperwork and some of the filing requirements at year end. Payrolling benefits, which is actually going to, as I understand, become compulsory from April 2026, alleviates the need to prepare and file P11Ds, and it also removes one annual filing deadline, which I think is 6th of July or the 5th. I'll look that up. But yeah, and then lastly, really, it's just making sure that that final FPS is submitted to HMRC when you're really happy with the employee data and the monthly filings. And we really like the way UK Payroll handles P60s. Push of a button, they're sent out. And just like all documentation, not only does it get emailed to them, but it also syncs with the document section of their employee records in HiBob. And that's something I particularly like, because in the old days, it would at least be once a month that an employee would chase me for an old payslip or something like that. Now I can just, in one sentence, direct them to find it themselves in their employee profile.
Yeah, that's amazing. I must admit that it's a good function to have, to be able just to go to employees and say, go to this one place, and that's where everything is, and it's just stored for you, which I think what I've taken away from that is that a top tip from you is to keep on top of everything through the tax year, which is something that is like the payroller in me loves. Like, why would you want to leave everything till year end? And if there's an easy way of doing it, then that's great. Just a quick question that I see in the chat, which is actually relevant to what we were talking about. It's maybe not a question word. Felix, I think you'd mentioned that the payroll function at HiBob is mandatory from April 26, but I think we were talking more about payroll and benefits is going to be mandatory from April 26. So if anybody has got any benefits.
I think phasing out P11Ds, so essentially almost all benefits in kind will need to be reported in monthly payslips.
Yeah, exactly that. So there's the ability in Bob to payroll benefits, which I think Chris is going to go through slightly later in the session. So that functionality is already there, which is amazing. So how does your HR team, Felix, use UK Payroll? What does their interaction with that look like?
Yeah, sure. So we make use of the different user roles within UK Payroll. So you can have an admin, editor, and reviewer. And that means that over time, as kind of our HR team has grown and got more involved in payroll, they've actually been able to take more of my hands as the CFO and actually own the monthly filings, or at least checking that new starters, giving their first pay slips a once over, making sure that they're not on any dodgy tax codes, things like that. And also, again, making sure that leavers are being paid the correct holiday in lieu, things like that. So just having that kind of dual user permission functionality in UK Payroll means that we can still get approval, second pair of eyes before final sign off, but it certainly enables the HR team to do more of the actual payroll prep process. And then my last comment on that is because they are one system and the integration is always getting deeper and deeper, essentially the HR team are just working on employee data within HiBob. There's even things now like variable pay, which might be bonuses or something else, can actually be recorded, again, natively within employee profiles, and then they sync to UK Payroll. So it's almost as if more and more is being able to be done within the source of truth employee profiles, which means that within UK Payroll, it's really just about checking pay slips. What I particularly like actually is a quick view that you can have of variances in net pay. When you've got a lot of employees to look through, it's great just to be able to filter them or sort by net pay changes, which often highlights any issues or confirms things like variable pay.
You've given us a great overview of everything that works really well for you with UK Payroll and tax year end. But on the flip side of that, what would you say the biggest challenges are that you've encountered during tax year end?
Sure. Yeah, I've been thinking about that as well because I've painted it out as all roses and really simple. But to be honest, I think the hardest thing actually is making sure that you're aware of and accounting for changes in the upcoming tax year. Obviously, this year, April 25, there's some fairly major changes to employers' national insurance, things like that. One thing that I must admit passed me by is that the employment allowance, which is getting increased, has actually had the eligibility thresholds removed. So I was under the impression that we were still ineligible for that due to our size, but great news to understand that all companies can now claim that, as I understand, from 25, 26. And so to me, that was a real example and a wake-up call of how it's finance and HR's duty really to keep on top of all these changes. Anything that impacts employees and their take-home pay, we really like to be proactive and communicate that to people. Equally, we're always making sure that for our own forecasts that we're factoring in changes, for instance, to employers' NI. And the main other point on that is that obviously a lot of payroll and tax filing dates are fixed throughout the year for all entities, but then especially for pensions, you'll have some deadlines that are specific to an entity, for instance, re-enrollment dates. It's really important to track those. Again, we're able to do that within UK Payroll, make sure that we're getting reminders. So I'd say that keeping up to date with any changes in tax legislation that will affect payroll, and then also making sure that you've got mapped out all the upcoming filing dates, some which are specific to individual entities. Yeah, gives you a peace of mind coming into the new tax year. And obviously the key there is to avoid disruption and potential penalties.
Yeah, absolutely. You do not want to start the new tax year with penalties from HMRC. Definitely not. We have a couple of questions in chat, if that's all right. I'll just run them past you. Can you just remind the audience how many employees you've got currently that you're using Bob UK Payroll for?
80 across 3 entities. So yeah, obviously I appreciate we're on a small size. So all of my experience and my comments are based on a company of our size. But I do genuinely feel like the systems we have now could scale to being hundreds essentially. I think we've got a system that can certainly scale with us.
And what made you decide to use Bob UK Payroll for your UK payroll employees and not a global provider that covers both the US and the UK?
Yeah, that's a really good point because we actually onboarded UK Payroll when it was a separate company, Pento. This was way back in the beginning of 2022. And that was before we even had the idea of a US office. We do use a US payroll provider, obviously to file in the US, but we still use Bob as the group-wide global HR system. Now, obviously there's a little more work involved maintaining 2 separate systems, but the key is that the US one, integrates deeply with HiBob as well. So there's no duplication of data, and I would rather choose an excellent UK payroll provider that has very deep integrations with HMRC and local pension providers than a one-stop global provider that maybe didn't have as good a solution specifically for the UK market.
Amazing. Thank you very much. The final question from us here is, what would your 3 top tips be for successfully navigating year end as a CFO?
Yeah, okay, cool. Well, I guess I'll try and sort of summarize the key points I've covered. I think it's really keep on top of your monthly filings. Do a little bit of work every month. Don't let anything slip by and say, oh, I'll fix that at year end. That's really, having that attitude has helped us essentially make year-end a simple process. Make sure you've got a really good understanding of changes in the upcoming tax year. So that's both for tax and also filing dates, some of them which may not even be annual. For instance, pension re-enrollment, I think it's every 3 or 4 years. So that's the type of thing that can really catch you by surprise, especially when you have multiple payroll entities. And then, be tracking key dates essentially. And then lastly, I guess I can say for payroll benefits, even if you are still filing P11Ds, why not make that change this year if you can? Although I guess it might be too late for payroll, but get a head start and don't be caught out by the changes that are coming in April 26.
Very much always be prepared.
Try to be.
Try to be. Absolutely. Amazing. Felix, thank you so much for your time. We haven't got any of the questions specifically for you in the chat, so we will hand back over to Camilla now. Thank you.
Fantastic. That was a really insightful overview. Thank you very much for that. So just feeding on from some of the key points that were raised. So obviously kind of keeping on top of your payroll each month and making sure that it's nicely balanced and everything reports well to HMRC. Just going back to our polling questions, I've noticed that on the results there, we still have quite a lot of customers that are using the paper P11, the traditional P11D process, so reporting at the end of the tax year rather than reporting within each payroll run. So this is something that might be really, really good to actually pick up on and look to automate in your payrolls to make tax year end a little bit easier next year. It also feeds on quite nicely to a couple of the questions that we've received around some of our documentation and guidance. I'd just like to reassure you that there is some nice guidance that is available on our website, which takes you through not only the tax year end process, but also processes around setting up things like benefit in kind. So that is all available to you. So just moving on now from all that lovely information in the question and answer session, I'm going to pass over to Chris now to show you what the system looks like and what best practice looks like for tax year end. Over to you, Chris.
Thanks, Camilla. Okay. You can see my screen, can you? Okay, so when you very first log into UK Payroll, you're going to land on the overview screen, and you can consider this almost as your command center. So this is where you're going to receive any notifications about any relevant end of year items. So that could be, as you can see here, such as your P60s being ready to send out to the employees. We also want to help you stay legislatively compliant, and we also want you to be able to run a successful payroll, of course. So you'll always receive notifications here if there are any employees missing any important data that will prevent them going through payroll successfully, such as a missing tax code, or perhaps they haven't provided their bank details. They'll be flagged to you here so you can follow that up with the employee. What you'll also see here is a notification if there's any pay items that have been created in Bob and then don't yet exist in UK Payroll. So it's prompting you to create them in UK Payroll so we can ensure that they follow through into this month's payroll for you. Now, talking about integration, let's dive into the integration settings. So the first thing to note here is that because it's a native API, there's no costly API expertise required. This really takes the headache out of having separate payroll and HR systems and having to download spreadsheets, re-upload them into payroll, or having to have a third party build that API integration for you. This is so simple to use. It's controlled by a series of on-off toggles, as you can see here, as well as pick lists. And what we control here is things like your new starter information, compensation changes. So that could be salaries, one-off or ad hoc payments, or recurring payments and deductions. We also control things like your absences. So that could be maternity, paternity, or sickness. And those dates will flow through from Bob into UK Payroll seamlessly in real time. And we'll also control the personal information flow from Bob to UK Payroll. As I mentioned, this is all done in real time. You can also put approval processes on these changes, so you can still maintain an element of control. Also, though, to prevent your employees from having to log into several different systems to access their payroll documentation, we give you the option of sending that payroll documentation from UK Payroll back into Bob, including payslips, and we're talking about tax year end, so P11Ds and P60s as well as P45s for your leavers and pension enrolment letters. Now, let's take a look at some employee data. So we're going to look at Heidi's record here, but for this, actually, we're going to dive into Bob. And what I want to show you is some of those changes flowing through from Bob into UK Payroll. So with that in mind, let's make a change to Heidi's address. Change that to, let's change that to High Street. Something simple. What we can also do here is maintain a compensation data. So this is where you would add things like new salary records. So say from the 1st of January, give her an increase. And what I also want to add here for Heidi is a sickness record. So what I'll do is I'll mark her as sick for, say, the first 3 weeks of the year. Now, this data will flow through to Bob in almost real time. You do have the option to force a sync, so we'll do that now, just for the benefit of the demo. So we can see that data's pulled through here. We look at her compensation tab. We can also see that new salary record. And if we just jump into her payslip, we'll be able to see some information there about her new salary. But importantly, if we go to her absences tab, scroll down, we can see here that that absence record has flowed through. If we click into it, what we see here is that the system's calculated the average weekly earnings, and it's recognized that she works 5 days a week. And based off of that, it's calculated her daily rate for SSP. What it's also done is, without any manual intervention, it's calculated that there's 3 waiting days because there's no linked period of sickness. Now, if we scroll right to the bottom, what we see here is a breakdown of the pay she's going to receive based on this sickness. So taking into account the non-paid waiting days and then the SSP payable days. And if we view her payslip, then we can see that reflected here. Now, what we can also do, because I know a lot of companies will pay an enhanced top-up on sickness, is we can add a sick pay policy. So what we'll do is we'll set an effective date for that. And we'll choose the 10 days at full pay policy here. And what that will do is immediately, it will run those calculations in the back end, as it now realizes that there's an enhanced top-up to pay. And you'll see here that those changes have been made. So the SSP for the first 10 days, as well as the enhanced pay for the first 10 days, and then dropping down to SSP only. And if we jump back to Heidi's payslip, we'll see that company sick pay is reflected in there immediately as well. Okay. Now, Felix mentioned pensions when he was speaking just now. let's look at the pension enrolment process and how simple that is. So we're going to use Bob Dylan's record here. And the first thing we're going to do is set a pension provider. So I'm going to set Aviva. And what that does is it instantly assesses the employee based on age and the monthly pensionable earnings. And we can see here that this person's been assessed as an eligible job holder. So then we can enroll them in the pension scheme. We've also got the option here to postpone if we want to. And then you can choose your salary type, your pension type. So let's select salary sacrifice. What we can also do here is we can send that enrolment letter back into Bob. And to give you an idea of where that will end up, it will end up in the shared documents folder along with the payslips and any P60s or P11Ds. And we can also customize contributions as well. So if the employee wanted to contribute a little more, then they've got the option to do that. And then we can enroll the employee into the pension scheme. Felix also mentioned about re-enrollment. So we want to take the pain out of the re-enrollment process for you. So what we can do in settings, we can plug in the re-enrollment dates for you. What that means is that when you're approaching your re-enrollment dates, you'll receive reminders that employees will need to be reassessed and re-enrolled. So we take all of the pain out of that for you. Okay, now let's take a look at SINE parental leave. So for that, we're going to look at Bobby Brown's record. And we'll go to the parental leave tab here. And we can see here that the leave start and end date have flowed through from Bob. And we've plugged in the expected due date. What the system will also do is calculate the average weekly earnings for you. So there's no requirement to manually calculate that. And when we save this, what it's done is it's drawn up the pay schedule. So this can be shared with the employee. What you can also do, which is a really cool function, is, apologies. A really cool function here is we can share a draft copy of the payslip. Apologies again. So we can either view a draft or we can send that draft payslip directly to the employee. So if they're concerned about how much they're going to be earning in their first month of maternity, and this can apply to any scenario, such as long-term sick as well, then you can email out a copy of that payslip to the employee for them to review. If we go back into Bobby's record though, and back to that parental leave tab, similar to with sickness, what we can do is we can have an enhanced maternity top-up policy. And you can have more than one if your company operates more than one policy. But as soon as we add that and save those changes, you'll see here that based on that policy, it's calculated any contractual top-up due as well. And that will be instantly reflected on the payslip. There's no need to click a button to calculate the whole payroll like with some payroll providers. Everything's live in UK Payroll. So as soon as you make the change, it will be reflected on the payslip for you. Okay, let's take a look at some reports now. So let's go into a payroll. The first one I'd like to look at, and I think Felix mentioned it briefly, was the variance report. So here you can see a number of flags down the right-hand side to see that there are some variances in people's net pay. If we look at Audrey's record, significant variance, we can firstly hover over each pay item that's got an arrow and see where the difference is from this month to the last period. But if we want to really drill down into that, we can download the variance report from here against each payroll. And that will look something like this. So this is broken down into 3 separate tabs. We've got our really high level overview showing the previous payroll, current payroll, pound difference and percentage difference. And then we've got a lot more information here showing every single pay element. But then we also have the pay item tab here, which breaks it down and really drills down into the relevant information for each employee. And this is a real great tool for trying to spot exactly what those differences are and where they lie. And what I should have also mentioned is that you'll also see a note here against some of the employees which gives a really good indicator as to why there might be a difference in their pay this month. We can also provide a pension report, again, downloadable from the payroll here. This is your PAPDIS file, and this is going to provide you with all the information that you need in order to successfully upload your pensions data each pay period. So when I say all your pension data, we're talking about your contribution amounts and percentages, as well as any new starter info and any opt-out info as well. One other really useful report available here is the payroll report, which most of you will know as the gross to net. Now, this looks like a typical gross to net with your pay items all across the top, including things like gross pay and net pay and any court orders. Those will all appear in here. Now, once you're satisfied that you've reviewed all your variances, you can then review the payroll. And this is where you're going to receive that overview as to how much you're paying out, what your liabilities are essentially. And that's when you can confirm your payroll. And this is where we would initiate any approval processes on the payroll that you have. I'm not going to do that just yet. What I am going to do is, because it's the topic of the day, we're going to look at benefits in kind. So for that, I'm going to go back to Heidi's record. We've made it really simple for you to add those benefits in kind. On the Pay Items tab, we click on Add Pay Item here. You can see that there's a number of benefits flagged here, such as health insurance, company car, and so on, as well as some pre-configured ones, such as private health, expense payments, which we'll click into now. So these are all categorized for you under the correct headings. And it's really just a case of inputting the numbers here. And the calculations are made for you. And then you can indicate how that's going to be reported. And it will take you through all the necessary steps in order to correctly save that benefit. So we'll save and close that. So now if we look at Heidi's payslip, we can see that payroll benefit appearing there. And this can be true for notional benefits as well, where you only want to calculate the tax on them. Now for P11Ds, a very similar simple process. You've got a couple of options here. If we add a P11D benefit and select one of the many options here, give it a title and continue. So what we can do here is we can either upload directly into the system or we can manually key in. So I'm going to do the latter here. And it's a very similar process to how it was when we added a benefits in kind just now. Sorry, one moment. And then assuming you've added all your records, then we get a breakdown of the Class 1A NICs and the Class 1A NICs payable as well. And then we can, at the end of the tax year, when we're ready to, we can submit the P11Ds and the P11DBs. And all the payments are taken care for you via our HMRC integration. The HMRC integration is a really strong tool which allows us to draw in tax code changes directly to the employee's records, as well as student loan start and stop notices. As well as the HMRC integration for tax codes, what we can also do is capture those P45 details for new joiners in Bob before sending that into UK Payroll. So it removes the burden of doing that from the HR team. Something else that Felix mentioned was the employment allowance and the app levy. So within our settings here, we've got a page for allowances. If we look at the employment allowance first, it allows us to enter any amount already claimed for the tax year. and it will tell us what our remaining balance is. Similar with the apprenticeship levy. So we plug in the year to date. And it also allows us to share that allowance with other linked companies or charities as well. So it allows us to remain completely compliant. And then each month moving forward on our P32, we'll be able to see the employment allowance and the apprenticeship levy reflected there. Okay, and I think that's everything. Thank you very much.
Fantastic. Thank you very much for that, Chris. We've had a couple of questions actually pop through on the chat channel. So I just wanted to just double check with you. Is it possible to have multiple tiers for your company absence policy? So say, for example, if you're doing the first 6 weeks at full pay, the next 26 weeks at half pay, is that possible?
Absolutely, yeah. So I should have gone into that. But with your policies, you have the option to, exactly as you explained, Camilla, have a set number of weeks at full pay, then drop it down to a percentage of pay, and then drop it down to SSP only if you want to, or a combination of pay and SSP only. And you can also have multiple policies running at the same time as well for different tenured employees or different levels of bandings.
Fantastic. So really good coverage there of the different absence policies companies might have. Brilliant. So next question is around the notifications around the tax code updates for employees. We've got questions through about having automatic email notifications for them. So at the moment, do they just automatically update the person's tax code in UK Payroll and also in the UK tax settings within Bob?
Great question. I'll be honest, I'm not 100% sure on notifications, so we'll have to get back to you on that.
No problem. I know personally from my role, we are looking at enhancing this area in the near future. So watch this space for some updates. Okay. Let me just double check to see if there is anything else coming through on the Q&A section. Yes, a good one coming through about whether or not we provide a payroll journal.
Yes, we do, and apologies, I meant to show that. So the payroll journal in Bob is extremely configurable in the sense that you can add, we can split out by your org structure. So let's say you split out by site and department, we can split to that level. And we also allow you, of course, to add all your nominal codes as well. And then when you run your ledger or your journal, if you've added any new pay items via that integration or directly into UK Payroll, and you haven't allocated an account code to it, you'll be notified. So you're never going to run your journal with missing account codes.
Fantastic. Brilliant. So I don't think that we've got any more open questions on the chat channel. So what we'll do is we'll bring things to a close for today. I just wanted to take a few moments just to say a big thank you to our incredible speakers. So thank you very much, Felix, Amy, and Chris for the incredible demo. And it's been really, really good to hear your valuable insights into your experiences today. It's also been really inspiring to hear how organisations like the SINE Group have, SINE Group have seamlessly managed tax year end with Bob. So it's been really brilliant to hear. So just wanted to say thank you, and we look forward to sending out the recording of today's webinar. Thank you, everyone.